Bill Phillips leaned against the bed's headboard, staring at the small, simple object that had led to his current painful situation, a common package of paper matches. He counted the matches as he often did, noting 5 were missing, a number that never changed. This routine felt like a sign of his depression. The package was plain white with fuchsia printing, advertising a place called the Puma Denver. He hadn't known what that meant initially, and sometimes wished he never had. As he waited to call his sister Sandy, Bill reflected on everything that had happened since first encountering this matchbook, which began over 2 months ago. It was Thursday, almost 9 p.m. Eastern Time, his usual time to call his wife Linda, when he was out of town in Colorado Springs. Bill, a 37-year-old man with brown hair and blue-gray eyes, was away on one of his regular trips to check and upgrade the company's computers. He had been making these trips for 18 months since his company Abstract Devices Incorporated acquired a competitor in Colorado Springs. As he prepared to call Linda, he imagined her near the phone as she usually was, and smiled at the thought of being home with her soon. Bill Phillips' trips always began the same way, leaving Dayton, Ohio, on Wednesday afternoon and returning late Friday evening. His primary task was to ensure that all software and antivirus programs in the company's Colorado Springs facility were up to date and compliant, a crucial responsibility given the firm's work with military electronics. A military inspection could happen without notice, and Bill's job was to prevent any issues from arising. Bill had phoned his wife Linda on Wednesday evening to confirm his arrival in Colorado Springs. They chatted for about 15 minutes before exchanging their usual "I love you" and ending the call. Thursday evening came, and after another brief call with Linda, Bill settled in to watch a baseball game. He realized he hadn't told her about his earlier flight home on Friday, which would get him in around 7 p.m. instead of the usual 10 p.m. He called again at 9:20 p.m., but this time Linda didn't answer. He left a message, assuming she was busy with chores. The next day, Bill's earlier flight meant skipping his usual lunch, but he managed a snack at the airport before heading home. By 8 p.m., Bill was back in his quiet West Carrollton home, ready to surprise Linda with his early return. Originally, their home had belonged to Bill's parents, but when his parents decided to move to Florida for their retirement, they had given the home to Bill and his sister Sandy. After some friendly negotiations, Bill had bought out his sister, although doing so had required him to take a mortgage out on the property. It had been his home for over 10 years. He had owned the house for a year before he and Linda decided to marry, and it was natural for them to make the house their home together. With 3 bedrooms, it was large enough that they wouldn't have to move right away when they decided to have children. As he pulled into his garage, he wondered if Linda had considered the message he had left for her and whether she would want to go out for a quiet drink. At least he could see she was home because her new model Chrysler was in her spot right beside his more pedestrian Ford sedan. He hoped that if Linda was agreeable to going out, she would give him time to shower and change. He had been busy and rushed for most of the day, especially with the need to get to the airport earlier than he was, and he needed to freshen up. It shouldn't be a problem as he could get ready quickly. He entered the house through the kitchen entrance, left his laptop on the kitchen table, and went down the hallway towards their master bedroom. The door was almost closed, and he pushed it aside gently before stepping into the empty bedroom. He could see a dim glow of light visible through the slightly open door to the ensuite bathroom. After carefully setting down his suitcase, he quietly slipped off his shoes, jacket, and tie and walked to the bathroom door. When he opened it slightly, he saw his wife relaxing in the tub under a swath of bubbles. Her brown eyes were closed and he could tell she was probably in a state of semi-sleep. There were about a dozen candles of varying sizes and shapes scattered around the bathroom. "You look comfortable, my dear. It's been a while since I've seen you relaxing in a bubble bath. I almost feel like I should join you," he laughed quietly, knowing that his offer would be refused again as it always was. Linda didn't open her eyes before replying. "I've been waiting for you, but I think you can go have a shower in the bathroom across the hall and then come back to join me." Now she opened her eyes and quickly turned towards him with a radiant smile before continuing. "I didn't mean join me in the tub either, Bill. We'll need a bigger tub before you can do that." She let out a little giggle, implying that she wasn't totally opposed to the idea. Bill was already removing his shirt and unbuckling his pants as he answered, "I'll be right back. Don't you go anywhere." Linda giggled again and said, "I wouldn't dream of it. Get back here as soon as you can and I'll give you your reward for getting home so early." Bill wasn't a rocket scientist, but it didn't require that level of knowledge to realize that Linda had something in mind. She often felt especially playful after relaxing in a warm tub filled with bubbles and breathing the air sweetened by the aromatic candles she enjoyed. Within 10 minutes, Bill had returned to rejoin his wife in the bathroom. Linda tapped the edge of the tub and said, "Move a couple of these candles and then sit here." She began to move her slender body around in the tub, so that she would be facing the spot she had indicated. Linda got near him and kissed him. When the kiss ended, he asked, "What prompted the decision to become more adventurous?" "Not that I'm complaining." His wife smiled at him and answered, "I read a long article on how to please your husband in one of the women's magazines, and it mentioned how much men enjoy the full treatment." She paused before adding, "I asked Denise about it too." With the mention of her friend's name, Bill lost most of his smile. Denise Grady was a longtime friend of his wife's, a divorcee who spent most of her time, when she wasn't selling real estate, trying to seduce any man she came close to. She had even grabbed his bum in front of Linda, and then laughed at him when he objected. Denise was what his dad would have called a bottle blonde 38 with a figure that had been enhanced with silicone to give her a 38D chest to go along with her otherwise slim build. She was reasonably pretty, but it was her chest that attracted a lot of men. He just found her willingness to go out with a married man as quickly as with a single one off-putting. He and Linda had disagreed more than once about the fact that he disliked having her hang around with Denise. "So you're suggesting that I owe Denise a thank you for this wonderful experience we just shared?" "You know what I think of that idea, Linda." Linda stood up in the tub and began using a hand sprayer to rinse the bubbles from her body before she answered her husband, "I know you don't care for Denise, but she's not so bad." With that said, she started blowing out the candles, a job that Bill joined her in. On Saturday morning, Bill was the first to wake up, reflecting on the previous night when he and his wife had been more adventurous and uninhibited than ever. They had explored various aspects of their relationship, which left them both feeling satisfied and tired, eventually falling asleep from sheer exhaustion. Bill, smiling at the memory, got up quietly, ensuring he didn't wake his wife. In the bathroom, he relieved himself, washed up and brushed his teeth. As he put away his toothbrush, he noticed the candles still scattered around the room, a reminder of the passionate night they had shared. He began to collect the matches and put them on the shelf where Linda usually kept them. When he did that, he noticed 5 burned matches stacked on the vanity. At first he thought Linda might have scorched the surface with them, but when he picked them up he could tell they were damp and that she had probably put each one out by running water over them. He added them to the contents of the garbage can, and then picked up the book of paper matches that had been lying beside them. He didn't smoke and normally would never have a use for matches, so it was somewhat unusual that he took a closer look at the matches before placing them on the shelf with the candles. There were a couple of matchbooks already there, ones that his wife must have acquired for her scented candles. The matchbook in his hand was very plain, pure white, with writing on one side but no other identifying features. The writing was in a fancy cursive style and simply said "The Puma Denver." It seemed like an odd name to him, and it was probably for that reason alone that he would remember what was written on the matches. He placed it with the others on the shelf. During his morning coffee break on Monday, Bill remembered the matches he had found on the countertop in their bathroom. He was seated with 4 other men and 2 women, all enjoying coffee together as was normal for their group. When there was a lull in the conversation, Bill spoke up, "Has anyone here heard of something called the Puma Den? I saw the name on some matches, but I can't say I've ever heard of it." The response was a random combination of the word "no" and shaking heads. Within seconds, the conversation in the room had shifted to a new topic. Later in the morning, during a pause in the workday, Bill checked the date in an area phone book for the Puma Den but found nothing listed. He was beginning to get curious and did an internet search with the same results. Most people would have dropped it after that, but Bill was known for his attention to detail on the job, and an unanswered question became a challenge regardless of how insignificant it might have been. It was now firmly in his mind that he wanted to track down the source of the paper matches he had found in his bathroom. As they were having dinner on Monday night, a thought came to Bill's mind and he asked his wife, "So how did I happen to miss you on Thursday night when I called? Obviously you got my message and thank God for that, considering the welcome home that I got." He laughed and got up to get some steak sauce from the refrigerator, so he didn't notice the momentary flash of panic that crossed Linda's face when he asked this question. By the time he closed the refrigerator door and was turning to retake his seat at the table, she was ready with her answer. "Just after I talked to you, I went for a shower before bed and I didn't hear it ring. I got your message in the morning. I gather from your call that this is a permanent change to your return flight." Bill laughed and said, "The woman at the airline that I spoke with says it is a change to their schedule. I was so used to the old time that I am definitely lucky I spotted the change on my ticket, or I would have missed my flight home. I wasn't usually at the airport until well after their new departure time." They continued with their meals and were soon having dessert, chocolate cake that Linda had baked on the weekend. As they were enjoying the cake, Bill casually brought up the book of matches he had found in the bathroom. "Oh, Linda, when I was cleaning up the candles in the bathroom on Saturday morning, I found a book of matches from some place called the Puma Denver." "What is that?" "I've never heard of it." This time he kept his eyes on Linda, and he noticed a brief flash of shock or perhaps panic on her face, an unusual reaction that quickly disappeared as she regained her composure. Linda responded quickly, "I have no idea, Bill. I don't even know where I got those matches from. I must have picked them up somewhere." She finished her cake and, almost as if to avoid further discussion, stood up to clear the table, collecting the dirty dishes and taking them to the dishwasher. Bill couldn't see her face as she continued to speak, but the interaction left him feeling uneasy. He knew Linda well after nearly 10 years of marriage, and her reaction didn't align with what he considered her usual behavior. It was enough to spark his curiosity further, and while he didn't press her on it at that moment, he mentally noted her unusual response, sensing that there might be more to the story than she was letting on. The next morning, Bill stuck the book of matches in his pocket before leaving for work, thinking that perhaps someone might recognize them more easily. The matches stayed in his pocket for most of the day. It was late that afternoon when he was reminded of the matches. After he stuck his hand into his pocket to retrieve his pocket knife, he had a chip in one of his fingernails that was annoying him, and he wanted to pare it away with the knife. He felt the matches and took them out of his pocket to look at them once again. A few minutes later, when he went into the outer office, he brought them out again and asked several of his coworkers if they recognized them. No one did, and all he learned was that the printing was done in a color fuchsia, although someone else in the office argued that it was magenta. During the last half hour of his day, he had to drop by the technical services department to advise them of a new software version that needed to be installed on each individual computer in the building. It was not a job he would actually be doing himself, he had technicians to do that. There were 3 technicians in the office at the time he arrived, and just before he left, he took out the matches and asked if anyone knew where they were from. Jason and Carl, 2 men in their 50s, took a quick look before shaking their heads and going back to their work. But Jim, a young man who had been hired only a month before right out of college, grinned when he saw them. "Oh yeah, I know that place," Jim said, looking closely at Bill. "Where did you get them? I would very much doubt that you were there." He chuckled after saying that. Bill was a bit confused and asked, "Why do you doubt that I would have been there?" The young technician grinned again and replied, "You're not a match with their clientele. You're either the wrong age or the wrong sex." This confused Bill even more, and he said, "I think you'll have to explain it to me, Jim. I found these matches and I was curious about them. I'm not even sure what this name signifies. Can you enlighten me?" Jim laughed before answering, "Well, Puma is a wild cat, but it's also another name for a cougar." He looked at Bill to see whether this triggered a reaction. When he saw that Bill's face hadn't registered any recognition, he continued, "You know, a cougar is what they call an older woman who likes chasing younger guys. The Puma Den is a bar on the east side of town. It's on Indian Ripple Road, just after it changes from East Dorothy Lane, just west of where I-675 crosses." A belated look of understanding appeared on Bill's face and he asked, "Have you been there? You seem to be pretty well acquainted with it." Jim answered, "Oh yeah, I was there a few times. I got more than one bruise on my butt from being pinched by an aggressive cougar. I had more than a couple of them take me home for the night. Actually, I went home with one of them every time I was there. Then I met my wife and I quit going to Puma Denver. I hadn't thought of it for a couple of years, but talking about it brings back some old memories. As for not finding it in the phone book, the place is sort of playing the privacy angle. They don't even advertise on their sign that it's a bar, and the sign is pretty small. I think they depend on word-of-mouth advertising. One of the guys in my dorm told me about it. He could see that Bill was quite interested, although he also seemed to have paled and become strangely concerned. So he continued, like I said, you're the wrong age or the wrong sex. Their clientele is single or divorced women from about 35 to probably 60, along with young guys they call cubs up to their mid to late 20s. Bill interrupted, did you say the young guys are called cubs? Jim thought for a second and then added, I guess that makes sense when you use the cougar analogy. Jim continued, yep, that's where the name comes from. A lot of the frat boys from Dayton University or Wright State go there to get laid. The ladies usually even buy them their drinks. It's not a big place, maybe room for about 100 or so, but it's usually hopping later in the week. For some reason, Saturday night is not the busiest night. I used to think that Wednesday to Friday were the best nights to be there. He stopped speaking and gave a wistful smile as though he was remembering something. Bill had a question and asked, is that their only clientele older women looking for younger guys? Are they all single or divorced? Jim replied, yeah, I'd say that's all their business caters to. The drinks are pricey, probably because once one of the ladies hooks up with one of the cubs, they generally like to get out of there. There have been some pretty foxy women come in there, and when a guy hooks up with one of them, he wants to get her out of there quickly before some other guy cuts in on his action. He laughed before adding, it's a bit cutthroat sometimes. There are quite a few ladies who like to hang around and dance to the jukebox, but they're all there for one thing. I think most of them leave once they find a guy they want to get to know a bit better, if you know what I mean. A few seconds later he added, I don't think they check ring fingers at the door, so there could probably be some married women in there, wives interested in getting a little bit on the side. They had pretty much covered the subject, and Bill thanked Jim for the information before he took his leave. Sticking the matches back into his pocket, he was now worried and concerned about how Linda had obtained the matches. He couldn't for 1 second believe that she would have been to the place, although her friend Denise Grady sounded like a definite match for the female Pat. Bill had told his wife many times about how much he disliked her friend, and now he was wondering if his concerns could have been too well placed. He still felt he could trust Linda, but he certainly didn't trust Denise. Maybe if he was lucky, Denise had simply left the matches at his home. As Jim turned to walk away, Bill could see how a woman would be interested in him. Jim was a handsome man with the popular bad boy look, enhanced by an intricate tattoo on his left forearm and a small soul patch on his lower lip. Bill tried to imagine Jim with his wife Linda, but he just couldn't do it. Bill got home slightly before his wife that afternoon. The first thing he did was put the matches back in the bathroom on the shelf where they had been, until he thought more about this. He didn't want Linda to realize that he was interested in her paper matches. That evening they went out for supper at the Alibi Club and had a good time together. Linda was even interested in having a drink in the attached lounge after their meal, and they spent an hour and a half there, getting up and dancing several times while they nursed a drink each. When they got home, she once again tried to show him how practice makes perfect. Just as she had earlier, she managed to take his mind completely off the matches with her affection and attention. Bill might not have constantly wondered about the significance of the matches, especially when his wife managed to take his mind off them, but thoughts of cougars, young men, and matches were never too far from his conscious mind. For the rest of the first 2 weeks that he was home, he realized as time passed that he thought about the situation more and more often. He was unable to accept the idea or the conclusion that Linda had been to the Puma Den herself. It was also hard for him to imagine how else she could have managed to acquire them. Eventually, Bill came to the tentative conclusion that Denise must have been responsible for getting the matches, and then either forgot them at his house when she visited his wife, or perhaps offered them to Linda to use with her candles. He could also imagine Linda asking Denise for the matches to keep on the shelf in the bathroom, so that she would have a supply when needed. At least that was what he tried to convince himself of. He was only marginally successful though, and his confidence level varied greatly. Bill spent most of his weekend working in the backyard while Linda was busy with house cleaning, but his mind was preoccupied with a growing concern about his wife's fidelity. The anxiety had kept him awake during the nights, and by early Monday morning he resolved to get to the bottom of it. He decided to investigate, hoping to find proof that would either confirm or alleviate his fears. Later that morning, Bill went to the technical services department to speak privately with Jason Shields, a senior employee with expertise in surveillance equipment. Jason was known for his knowledge and experience in setting up and maintaining security systems, especially given the sensitive nature of their company's work involving military contracts. Bill knew that if anyone could help him discreetly monitor the situation and find out the truth, it would be Jason. "What's this about, Bill? Do we have some security concerns somewhere?" Bill didn't quite know how to broach the subject, but finally said, "I have a situation that's more delicate than most. It's a personal request, not for something here at Abstract Devices. I'm hoping you can give me some advice strictly off the record." Jason didn't hesitate to answer. "I don't have any problem with that at all. You've been more than fair with me over the years, and I'd be very happy to help you with anything if I can." Jason stood there expectantly, waiting to hear what Bill had on his mind. Now that the moment had arrived where Bill would have to put his fears and suspicions into words, and actually share them with someone else, he was suddenly unsure if he should take that step. He realized he was almost afraid that by speaking those words, he could somehow make them come true. "Well, I'm not really sure what I want. I guess I'm hoping you can suggest something to me. I'm wondering if there's an easy way for me to bug my own home." He became even more nervous and hesitant before continuing, "I need to know whether anything suspicious is happening around my home when I'm out of town." Jason caught on quickly and immediately replied, "I think I know what you're getting at, Bill. I'm not sure if you know this, but I got divorced about 18 months ago. It was surveillance equipment that I installed that gave me what I needed to prove my wife was having an affair with our next-door neighbor, a man I had considered a good friend." Bill quickly nodded his head and said, "That's what I need. I don't think there's anything going on, but I have to know whether my suspicions have any foundation. In fact, I'm afraid I'll drive myself crazy with the uncertainty, even though my reasons for being suspicious seem pretty slim." The older man nodded at two of the chairs and said, "Why don't we sit down here and you can tell me what's got you feeling this way? I went through this with my wife, so I guess it could give me some small measure of expertise on the subject, although I know that everyone's circumstances are different." The suggestion seemed logical to Bill, and he quickly spilled out his concerns. "I don't really have anything concrete. It all started when I found a package of matches in my bathroom that advertised a place I didn't recognize. It's a bar called the Puma Denver. I finally found out what it was all about from Jim, the new man in your department. Long story short, it's a bar catering to middle-aged women who want to hook up with young guys. I can't imagine Linda, that's my wife, going to a place like that, but that's what I need to find out. She also has a divorced friend who could potentially be a really bad influence. Last week, I was doing some research on the internet, searching for what to look for in terms of suspicious behavior from a cheating spouse. Only a couple of them struck home. The big one is that lately my wife has been much more aggressive sexually. According to what I read, that might mean she's trying to avoid suspicion, or maybe she's trying to make up for something she's already done." Bill hesitated but finally continued. "Another thing I read was that a change in sexual practices might be a sign of infidelity. Lately, she's apparently overcome a long-time aversion to oral sex." He laughed nervously and added, "I know you're going to think I'm crazy to be complaining about that." The younger man quickly returned to his sober state and said, "There was also the night I phoned home while I was out of town and she wasn't there to answer my call. She gave me what seemed to be a plausible reason for that, but I have no idea if she was telling me the truth. Last but not least, I'm pretty sure she lied to me when I asked her about the matches from the Puma Denver." He squirmed uncomfortably in his chair before saying, "I know it isn't much and I've probably got everything all wrong, but this is eating at me now. I really need to find a way to prove to myself that I'm wrong about all of this." Now that he'd made his explanation, Bill leaned back in his chair and relaxed, having just realized that he had been hunched forward awkwardly and was completely tensed up. Jason didn't say anything at first but finally began. "I don't think you have as much to go on as I did, but I don't mean to say that you're wrong to be concerned. I also looked into what clues for infidelity might be, and in my case the big one was that my wife started working more hours of overtime, but I could see her checks weren't any larger when they were deposited in the bank. I installed some small surveillance cameras, one in the living room and one in the bedroom, along with a digital recorder on the telephone line. I was finally able to tape her phone conversation with the next-door neighbor, making plans to meet him at the Red Roof in Over by 75. I think it's over in your direction, isn't it? Bill nodded and said, I know the place. I see their sign every time I drive to work or when I go back home. Jason continued, I never did get anything from the cameras, but I was able to use the information on the audio recording to be waiting there to get footage of the two of them going in and coming out of the room one evening. It was enough, especially when it showed them kissing and feeling each other up in the parking lot. He shook his head and looked sad as he said, 22 years down the drain just like that. At least the kids took my side and have basically disowned her. They're both in university, and these were supposed to be the stars of our golden years. I guess I don't know where she moved to, somewhere near Detroit, I think. She has a sister there. The neighbor got divorced too, but he had no interest in a long-term relationship with my ex. His wife took him to the cleaners because they had a prenuptial agreement that she was able to use against him, something about an adult or hardly getting any of the family assets. He seemed to realize he was drifting away from their discussion, and quickly laughed before continuing, That's enough about my problem. You're here for my help with your own situation, not the other way around. Jason thought for a moment before saying, I think I know exactly what you need. There's some new equipment that just came out and I read about it the other day. It's high definition, both audio and video capable, and connects to a computer using Wi-Fi. It's small and provides very high quality output. He quickly got up and said, Let me go get one of the trade publications from my desk. I'll show you what I mean. Before he left the room, Jason stopped and added, I'd loan you the 2 cameras I used, but I gave them to a friend. I do have the telephone recorder though, and I'll bring it to work with me tomorrow. It works well and you can just give it back to me when you're finished with it. It took Jason a little longer than planned to find the publication he was thinking of, and Bill used the time to think about where he would place the surveillance devices. He thought he had it all figured out, but everything changed when Jason returned. Jason seemed excited when he re-entered the conference room, waving the trade publication as he came in and sat down across from Bill. He opened it to one of the pages and turned it so that Bill could see the information. This little baby is quite the camera, Jason said. It uses Wi-Fi to send audio and video to a PC or network server and accepts programming from the PC. It can be run by battery or an AC adapter. There are also versions built into things like a working clock radio, a plug-in air freshener, or a carbon monoxide detector. Jason reviewed the advertisement alongside Bill and quickly grasped the specifics of the surveillance equipment Bill was interested in. After confirming the details on the manufacturer's website, Jason agreed that the equipment would be a perfect fit for Bill's needs. When Bill inquired about the time frame for obtaining the equipment, Jason estimated that it could be delivered and installed within a week, well before Bill's next trip. This would give them ample time to set it up and ensure it was functioning properly, providing Bill with the peace of mind he sought. Jason did another quick check of the website and found that there was a distributor in Cincinnati. I deal with this supplier from time to time. I think we could get them to ship whatever you want overnight. Delivery won't be a problem. In fact, I should have a good working relationship with their sales manager. Her name is Heidi Westerback, and I knew her years ago when we were teenagers and both of us lived in Xenia. Jason paused and it was obvious he was thinking, his gaze fixed on the end wall of the room. Bill was just about to say something when Jason continued, I think I heard she had been widowed a while back. Maybe I can use your order as an excuse to get to know her again, not as a customer and client but as man and woman. You know,